Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. We are really excited to have you here. And welcome back to Her Rules, Her Rise, where we speak bold truth with sacred love. And as always, I want to introduce my beautiful hosts, beautiful, amazing leaders, Danielle Dittberner and Dr. May Lee. And so today we're diving into psychological safety. We're actually doing a full hour episode. And so we're excited about this one in that we're going to look at what it is, why it matters, and why it feels like it's under attack in every corner of our society. So a lot of people go, what does psychological safety mean? They think we kind of have a thought. And so in simple terms, it's really the ability to feel safe, to speak up, to share ideas. So speak up for either yourself or for others, share ideas, take risks, and be yourself without fear of punishment or humiliation. It's that vulnerability, which is
Mhm.
actually a strength. A lot of times people think of it as a weakness, and Brene Brown will absolutely tell you that it is a strength. So that's kind of the very general. We're going to look at it a little bit more. So the first question I want to ask you is, do you feel safe enough to tell the truth? Again, in any scenario, whether it's home, relationships, family, schools, work, your church, the community, on social media, a whole bunch of things. And I think, again, truth, what does that mean? A lot of times we can take it for saying we're speaking our truth, but it can be really harsh. And so we'll talk a little bit about that. So what is it? Where are these places that do you feel safe enough? And if your answer is sometimes or not really, you are definitely not alone. We're talking about this today, and it is so at risk in the United States, and we'll talk about that as well. And we'll also talk about what we could do about it. So, what psychological safety really means. So, there is a lot of research, and I'm going to be sharing a little bit of research to kind of, again, give you some of that background. So, Amy Edmondson from Harvard Business School is one of the preeminent researchers for psychological safety. And she's widely recognized as that leader, that leading researcher on psychological safety. So, her words, just a quote from her, a belief that one will not be punished or humiliated for speaking up with ideas, questions, concerns, or mistakes. So, from Amy Edmondson, from her research, she looked at teams that had high psychological safety. It's not that they're nicer or less critical, they're more open.
Mhm.
So people yeah, feel safe enough to ask tough questions, admit errors, and try bold ideas. So again, they feel that it's created a culture of it's okay to make a mistake, right?
Mhm.
The key is even while we're doing all those things, you can still do that while being kind and not disrespecting others. Because I think a lot of times people can use it as a vehicle to kind of punish others, right? With how our words are coming out. So, and we'll talk about that. So, Google's Project Aristotle, we're talking Google between 2012 and 2016. Amy Edmondson did research with them, and they confirmed her findings that psychological safety was the number one factor in successful teams across the company. So, again, this is a huge, successful company. It mattered more, so that psychological safety mattered more than individual talent, resources, or structure, right? So, that piece is
Huge.
huge, right?
Uh-huh.
And so the impact of this research, so teams with psychological safety are more innovative because people aren't afraid to share ideas. They have fewer errors because people admit mistakes earlier, which prevents big failures. They show higher engagement and retention because people feel valued, right? And so, we see a lot of that. I know Zappos is another big company. There are a lot of big companies that are really looking at this. And they're doing it within their own organizations, though there's a lot of influence that I think, and when we're going to talk about kind of external influences that are also having a negative impact on those things. So
Yeah.
when psychological safety is missing, people tend to go quiet and not speak up. So they withhold ideas. They may hide mistakes. They're ashamed to show anything because they feel like they're going to get trampled on. And they often play it safe. So, but that silence costs teams and communities in terms of growth, creativity, and trust. So again, it's that it can be an angst. And I know we all have experiences where we felt that angst when it wasn't psychologically safe for us. When it is present, people lean in. They're more comfortable to kind of have conversations. They speak up, challenge respectfully, and create solutions together. So, one huge thing that popped into my head is Congress right now. They're not being respectful. And so this is a big piece of why they're not getting things done. So it really has a huge impact. So, Danielle, what are some of your thoughts about how, why do you think teams can't function without it?
Yeah, that it all comes down to this notion of vulnerability-based trust.
Mhm,
If we as humans do not have that sense of trust in another or with another individual, it's extremely difficult for us to be able to open up ourselves and to be vulnerable. And there's been other research done, and I'm sure in Amy's research, it probably backs this up. I have not seen her research. When we are able to open ourselves up in a vulnerable way, we are essentially allowing ourselves to be seen
mhm,
and heard and acknowledged with another individual, which then allows us to have those bonds of connection
mhm,
and of teamwork and working together. That's where
mhm.
resiliency is created
Yeah,
because really we're functioning from a place of love
yeah,
instead of fear.
yeah.
It's that fear that ends up really hijacking our amygdala and creating this disconnect with one another
Mhm.
and creates that isolation or that silo effect.
Yeah.
And so for me, I always go back to how are we cultivating this space
Mhm,
where we are allowing not just ourselves, but others to show up authentically with our truth in a
mhm.
space where we don't have to be worried about being beaten down by another person, by having our opinions or even our expression to be dismissed.
Yeah,
And that's what comes back to that whole respect issue is the dismissal.
yeah. Can you share a brief example of how you were either felt safe, like an experience where you specifically felt psychologically safe or didn't feel
Mm.
psychologically safe? We'll get into more details, but
Yeah,
what's one for
yeah,
your own personal
yeah.
experience?
Man, there's so many.
Mm,
I'll say, generally speaking, past relationships
mm,
always had a struggle with that psychological safety because there wasn't a solid foundation where that vulnerability-based trust was established from the get-go. And so it uh, many times it just created this space of I'm going to show up, but I can only show up to a certain level.
mm.
I can't be fully just open
Yeah.
because there were times that maybe I shared something that to me was sacred or was um, maybe a little bit fragile, or maybe I judged myself or felt shameful about the way I showed up or something.
Mhm.
And that piece of information was then used against me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
That's kind of a
and
red flag. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And so I think that's partially what gets in our way as humans of, okay, I'm going to open up and I'm going to share this little tidbit with you
Hmm.
and kind of test this out. And if somebody can't honor that and they can't respect that and see that, ooh, this person is sharing something that's really intimate,
Mm.
and they use that then against you, and maybe whenever maybe they feel threatened or defensive and
Mhm.
they don't fight fair,
Yeah.
that destroys that sense of trust that you've then already started to establish.
Yeah. That I heard you say fair and again trust and that vulnerability. And those are the key things. I
Mhm.
mentioned scarf in the past, the
Yeah.
things that were how our brains are wired. But
Mhm.
yeah, absolutely. Those are some key things. What about you, May?
Yeah, definitely. I remember back in third grade, my mother went for my parent-teacher conference and came back and said, May is very bubbly, but she's a chatterbox. And that stuck with me my entire life. So by the time I got to high school and in my history class, we were talking about China and Taiwan and all the political changes going on, and everyone was raising their hand to volunteer their opinions, and I didn't say a word.
Oh,
After class, the teacher pulled me aside, sat down on one of those desks, facing me with, he goes, May, what's your opinion about what's going on? And I told him, he goes, why do you never raise your hand to volunteer your opinions? And that was when I realized that over time, when I was 8 years old, I was very bubbly and out and just being myself. Somehow over time, probably my parents, okay, told me you're better seen and not heard.
oh,
you know. It's better
yeah.
it's better to keep quiet and whatever the hell that goes. Pretend you're dumb than open your mouth and make no let everybody know for sure, something like that.
Yeah. Yeah. That
So
is so powerful and so heartbreaking, May. It
yeah,
just
and
to hear
even
how that
now,
one situation had
Mm.
such a huge impact on you is,
for sure. And then I went on to go into science, and when you're in science, you have to be 100%
Mm.
truthful about your data. You cannot
Mhm.
no ifs, ands, and buts. You have to be very careful what you say. So that even further cemented that you can't just,
Yeah.
you just can't be carefree about anything about your speech. And
Yeah.
then the result was, of course, and it's a lot of pain and misery of
Yeah.
being shut down, not expressing yourself.
That
And that's,
trickle effect. It's like,
yeah.
that's
And
a,
so how many times in school now you
mhm,
have to obey the teacher. You cannot speak out. You have to, be very careful in corporations.
mhm.
And then
Mm.
of
Yeah.
course now in the world, right? Against whatever is happening in the world, are we speaking up? Are we able to speak up our
Yeah.
speak?
Yeah,
And
and we're going to get to all those
yeah,
examples a little bit more. I know for me, I have a quick shout out for when I was psychologically safe, and it is all of I do training. I'm a training for Coach Approach to Adaptive Leadership, and have partnered with Coach Approach to Adaptive Coach Approach partners, and so all of those people that are in that group, we've done a lot of work around psychological safety, and they're the ones who really introduced me to it. And we just had lunch together last week, and it is just such a joy to be with these people. Like we want feedback. I love getting feedback now when it's in that psychological safety, whereas before I was very similar, May, again, being the youngest of seven. And so that's like that's kind of the other side of it because we all have a ton of not being psychologically safe. This one is just such a powerful, like, oh, I love it. I love these people. They could tell me anything, and I
Mhm.
would absolutely listen to what they're saying. So that's an example of my own personal when I have felt psychologically safe, in addition to working with the two of you. Like as we were talking before this, and it's like I love these two women and we're colleagues, but it's that love that makes us
Yeah.
better at being colleagues. Like we can
Yeah.
really support each other truly and not just sugarcoat everything.
Yeah.
And we all accept our opinions. So it's so powerful. So just kind of want to share a little bit more research. 86% of employees say they feel they belong, but only 76% feel safe speaking up. And that is from diversity.com from this year. So
Mhm.
belonging and safety are not the same. So 1 in 4 workers still hold back out of fear,
Mhm.
right? And then another one, Harvard Business School, and this was just May, says leaders often confuse safety with comfort. So true safety means people can challenge and question, even if
Mhm.
it's uncomfortable. So it's not about being nice, it's about being real
Mhm.
and being respectful. That's kind of the key because I think that can be, I keep going back to the Jerry Maguire, um, where his girlfriend, Kelly, well, I'm blanking on her last name, um, where she says, you're the one who said we wanted brutal honesty in our relationship. And he's like, I think you added the brutal. And
Mhm.
so, again, it's not out about being nasty.
Mhm.
um, the big piece of or the state of our country right now. So there's so much division in the country. I mean, I think everyone would say that we are in a I mean, everybody I talk to, everyone feels it. We're all in a bad place, and not just in this country, yes, in the world, though I think our country is at the pinnacle of it. And so, we have fear, polarization, and this cancel culture from all sides. It's
Mhm.
not just one, it is every aspect really erodes that safety. And again, social media, because people don't see others as human beings on social media. If we were actually talking to that person to their faces, would we say the things that we say on social media? I don't think we would.
No.
I know Princess Kate just recently said about how, there's just this, this disconnection between people. Absolutely, I think that's a big piece of it. So, Danielle, can you talk a little bit about the impact on families?
Yeah. Yeah. So I work with a lot of families, parents, um, individuals who are working on their relationships and that nucleus of the family. And it's really challenging right now because of all of the stress factors that are at hand. Parents are in a space where a lot of times they're shutting down. And some of that, I think, is they're trying to preserve themselves and being able to show up for themselves and essentially put that oxygen mask on.
Mhm.
And in doing so, sometimes that can create a disconnect within their role as a leader within the family. I am actually working with several parents right now that it's hard for me as a coach to be able to watch and to understand their dynamic that they are going through because I can see them as their wholeness. And I can also see in many ways where neglect is happening. And so to not get too specific, but to provide some kind of broader context, it really is about the parent not being able to manage themselves and know how to show up or what to do to form that internal safety. And so then when their children are having big behaviors, whether that be tantrums or um, whining or having really big emotions. They don't know how to manage that within themselves. And so then they don't know how to show up as a parent to hold that safety for their child to be able to be open and expressive and to feel safe to share what their experience is, because oftentimes it can be viewed. I hate using this language, but it's language that I'm receiving from parents. So I'm just going to use that it's an inconvenience. They don't have time to
Mhm.
deal with their children
Mhm.
as they're showing up in this way. And we have to look at how is this trickle effect happening? Because if I were the parent, if I'm not managing myself, if I'm not seeing how I can show up as whole and attuning myself and my energy to what's going on with my family at the core,
Mhm.
of course, my children are not going to feel psychologically safe. They're going to be attuned to this external environment where there is so much stress, so much turmoil, so much uncertainty that then their normal way of behaving is in this response to stress, to fight or flight.
That's it. Yeah. It's a trauma response.
Exactly.
And our brains are shutting down, and people don't realize how much that is impacting all of us.
Hmm.
We just get on autopilot, I think. And,
Hmm.
you know, that damage that you're talking about with families is just, it's so big.
Hmm.
And I'll kind of share a little bit more about how that impacts schools. But, uh, you know, what you're saying again, it's like the nucleus of so many issues. Uh, and, and And we can't just condemn the adults
Hmm.
because they don't have the skills either. They
Right.
can't.
Right.
So it's we have to
If,
kind of look at this holistically, exactly what
yeah,
you were
yeah.
saying. Yeah.
And I think part of that too is as an individual in the workplace, and
Mhm.
I'm going to hand this off to you, May, after I say this, but like in the workplace, if there's not that psychological safety there, and you're spending 8 hours, the majority of your day there, and then coming home, and you're already primed in this place of being in this trauma response kind of fight or flight mode, then you're bringing that into the family dynamic. And so it's just this vicious cycle and trickle down effect.
Mhm.
And so it's not, it's a responsibility for every space that we are in, not just at the home, not just in schools, not just in our work environments, not just in our communities. It's all of it that we really need to be more conscious about. What are we doing ourselves
Mhm.
to not just own the space that we're in and show up vulnerably with courage, but how are we also enabling that in our environments?
Mhm. And we can only control our own behavior.
Right.
So, yeah.
Right.
Dr. May, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, exactly. Both of you, I hear what you're saying. First of all, I think it starts in the home is how safe you feel about expressing who you are and your opinions and
Mhm.
voice. And if there's a very strict parental culture where they shut you down, then it's going to be even harder when you go out into the world. But
Mhm.
once you're aware of it, you can take on exercises, training, coaching, to push yourself out
Mhm.
there against what you were raised to become.
Mhm.
So that's what I heard. Another woman, powerful woman leader, wrote a book, and she said, if the meeting is not open to you, just enter it anyway. It's like if the door's not open, go in there. And I'm like, wow. if I wasn't invited to a meeting, I would not go in there.
Yeah.
And then she said, if you're not invited to the table, create your own table. And I was like, wow, that is a very powerful thought. And so
Mhm.
that's what here we need to do as women, if we felt shut down, felt like we didn't have the right to say anything, we need to go there and push back, and create a community or a group of people where it is safe to speak your mind and foster that kind of feeling, or start your own company where that's acceptable,
Mhm.
like we have here, and keep building on that nucleus.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know, we were talking about, even just looking at kind of the government shutdown, how that is impacts schools. And I work with some schools that are in that DMV area, the DC, Maryland, Virginia area. And, again, there are a lot of people that work for the federal government that are parents, and just, there are a lot of people that are just, how are we gonna, this is not just a manipulation and a tool to gain power and to use it over our political enemies. It is about real people's lives, where real people are losing health insurance and losing and money to be able to pay for their rent or mortgage or food. When your basic needs, it's Maslow's, if your basic needs are being cut off, you're not going to be able to function and do everything else. So the implications of this are huge, and everybody's pointing fingers, and it's again, let's agree and let's disagree and do it respectfully so
Mhm.
that we can actually find these solutions. So for me, I've seen this in schools, specifically some things where just I've seen the adults are stressed, and that how their behavior is impacting the students. And again, you can feel it. You can feel that tension when you walk into a school, when you walk down the hallway, where you're, in an environment where I've been in schools where the teachers are screaming at the kids, and I'm like, that's it's a scary thing.
Yeah.
So, again, we'll get into a little bit more examples of this one, but I want to do kind of a pulse check for the audience. Where are you seeing or not seeing psychological safety in your daily lives? So, really think about that as we're going to share a little bit more data about the US specifically. So, 54% of US workers say job insecurity is a top source of stress, especially right now. This is APA Work in America survey in 2025. 54%. That's
Yeah.
crazy.
I see a lot of that
Half
with
of
my
us
clients. Yeah.
are
Yeah.
walking on eggshells about our job security, and the stress kills safety. I know all three of us have shared how this is, I mean, being an entrepreneur, like even when there's insecurity in other sectors in our world, it impacts us.
Yeah.
So it
We're all connected like a web,
yeah,
right? It doesn't matter what industry you're in, it's all
yeah,
interconnected.
yeah.
And it
So
trickles down from the top, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
And
exactly.
with each administration, you have a different culture with
Yeah,
it, right? That goes
yeah.
with how the leadership presents itself.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah. So 42% of employees fear their career will suffer if they speak openly about mental health.
wow.
So that
Yeah.
stigma is still huge. This is a NAMI Ipsos survey 2025. So almost half of workers, again, they worry that asking for help could hurt their future.
Mhm.
And it's not even just in employment opportunities, it's in families. I see this
Right.
especially with men. There is such a huge barrier with them feeling them asking for help. So that's a whole other episode. I feel like we definitely should do that one.
Yeah.
So, but workplaces that prioritize mental health report lower burnout and anxiety, and also it keeps people working. But
Mhm.
that's from a Mindshare Partners survey 2025. But when mental health is safe to talk about, everything else improves,
Mhm.
you know?
Mhm.
It's such a key thing.
And it goes back to that vulnerability-based trust, because if at the core of the organization, the value or one of the values is being able to prioritize that mental health, being able to prioritize the health and wellness of the individual, again, going back to that oxygen mask,
Yeah.
they're going to be able to come to work more wholeheartedly and be able to perform better.
Mhm.
That decreases stress levels. That also allows them then to have a more holistic way of being and showing up at home with more certainty, even in the face of uncertainty,
Yeah. Yeah.
because there is that support there, that
Yeah.
that value, going back to that value system of just allowing people to be human, to
Hmm.
have imperfections,
Yeah.
and to
Well,
show up to the best of their ability.
Yeah.
and here's where I think we're in this trend to become superhuman, you know,
Yes.
like
Mhm.
I've seen it in the colleges. There's
Yeah.
kids that go out of their way to become the best in their class, become so competitive that they almost had to they probably did, take medication to help them focus and get
Hmm.
their studies done,
Right.
higher
Right. And
grades.
that doesn't mean they have or do not have ADHD or
No, but
anxiety,
that
whatever.
carries
It's just
over into the
they may.
workforce, right? And
Right.
some companies are so competitive, they're asking their people to work 12, 15,
Mhm.
maybe more hours a day,
Yeah.
weekends.
And people are afraid to even disclose that they have a mental health
They're afraid
in
to
their
not take,
applications because they're afraid
yeah.
they won't get hired.
And
Yeah.
mental health is such a broad range, right? So as soon as you
Yeah.
label something with that, people think there's something wrong with them. So they
Yeah.
have to meet that standard of working excessive hours
Yeah.
because their team is doing it. And if
Mhm.
they go home early, they're going to look like a slacker. So
Yeah.
it's that,
Yeah. Yeah, and again, this we've been talking about kind of this trickle down effect, this federal influence on safety everywhere. This is where, like, so for me, I work in schools across the Northeast, and I have seen instances of blatant racism. So I have seen, and it's specifically, again, from what I've observed, it's most specifically towards Black boys, not just children of color, but Black boys and Black girls. Black boys higher than anything. That's consistently. I have seen, you know, let's say a first grade boy crying like he lost his puppy, crying, not tantrum crying, which
Mhm.
that's a big difference. And
Yeah.
still, we still don't, no matter what, they're in crisis right now. It's not about us. And I've seen literally teachers stand feet away from them and completely ignore their crying like that or scold them.
Mm-mm.
I'm,
Mm-mm.
it it is
he's
This is
crying for
enraging
help.
to
unbelievable.
me.
He's crying for help and nobody's there.
I've seen this more than once, and I'm it just is mind blowing.
And
Like, would you do that to your own child? Like,
in first grade, right, Dr. Ann, what's going to happen when this continues all the way up through high school? What do you expect is the trajectory of that child
I know.
based on he's crying for help and
Yeah.
nobody cares?
Yep.
Mhm.
And often they're the ones, again, going back to the ACEs study, they're the ones that are most likely to have post-traumatic stress disorder. And so what it looks like, it may look like ADHD, but it's not. It's
Mhm.
really a trauma response. And so another situation is that I saw a student they were doing an activity where the students were supposed to work as a team and help each other get from one place to another through a little like scooter thing. And one of the students, a little black boy, was by himself and kind of like saying, "Hey, hey, I need help." Like they were supposed to rescue each other. And there were three little white boys, and I'm like, "Hey, this he needs your help. Rescue him first before you go to the next place." And they were like, "Well, he's rolling all over the mat." And I like looked around and I'm going, so are half the other kids in this class, regardless. And so I'm like, that doesn't matter. And so he gave him the cart, and this little boy got on and, went. And then that same little boy was the one who helped them the rest of the way to get to the actual finish. And so it just, and I pointed it out to them like, hey, he helped you along the entire way, because there's such a filter that we all have from our own experiences that we generalize something. Somebody does something to us that may be from a particular population, whether it's Black, Hispanic, white, whatever. We all have our own trauma experiences, and we take those situations and generalize them. We have this fear, whether we know it or not. And that's where racism is coming out. And if we don't recognize that that's what it is and reflect on ourselves, people, we don't want it's not about getting defensive. It's about saying, you know what? I can only control my own behavior. So what can I do differently to improve it? So, that's
Yeah.
my example.
Yeah. And I think even like to add to that, there's so many biases that people formulate from their own experiences
Mhm,
and from what has culturally been passed down to them
mhm.
through family as well as environment, community,
Socialized. Yeah.
those social environments.
Mhm,
And we need to be honest with ourselves about biases that we carry so that we can be mindful of that in the space that we're holding with other individuals,
mhm,
so that there is a sense of safety, so that we are leaning in and actually listening with our hearts
mhm,
instead of our minds, because especially in states that we're in right now, we are flooded with cortisol. And when we are flooded with cortisol, it completely cuts us off from being able to connect with others.
mhm,
I mean, going into neuropsychology of that, when we're in a fear response, we're hijacked by our amygdala.
mhm,
We are in defense mode. No
mhm,
matter what that is, we're always looking to see like what is the
mhm.
threat that's out there, and we are going to fight against it, or we're
Yeah.
going to run away, or whatever our fear response is.
Yeah.
And that does not allow us then to build that psychological safety,
Yeah.
which is about really slowing down
Mhm,
and being mindful of what's going on internally in that physiological response, and being able to at times set that aside,
mhm.
noticing where biases are contributing to that,
Yeah.
and really being able to lean into how do we connect more.
Yeah. It's that having those conversations, putting our phones down
Yeah.
because they have hijacked our brains, and
Mhm.
literally talking to people. It just, we need to do more of that.
Yeah.
I think, oh, we lost May. Um, but it's that, everything that's happened with Doge. And like I said, we've talked about it. It's been a ripple effect. I know
Mhm.
I lost contracts because of, and again, the impact on like school boards. I've seen it directly on school districts,
Mhm.
on the state. Again, it's across every aspect of our lives. And you know, I think as we get into start looking at, we're going to kind of wrap up with what needs to happen.
Mhm.
I just want to always put this reminder out. We can only control our own
Mhm.
behavior. We
Mhm.
cannot control other people. So it's up to us to reflect and look at our own situation, our own biases, our own mistakes, and be okay with looking at them. And that's where I think counseling is one big piece. The
Mhm.
challenge is right now, a lot of these cuts have impacted the availability of counseling or the insurance to pay for the counseling.
Yeah.
So again, this is really a difficult ripple effect. Um, I think that as we kind of finish things here, Danielle, if you want to share kind of what do you think needs to happen in leadership practices
Yeah.
in general and in families,
Yeah.
especially.
Yeah. I'm gonna take this a little bit more generalized and kind of go off of what you were just saying of like we need to recognize like we are only in control of ourselves. We are the leader of our own lives. We are leaders.
Mhm,
And so if we are in a position where we're losing resources, recognizing that we can still be the source of that. And when we're looking at the nucleus of the family, how are you showing up as a leader within that family?
mhm,
If we're needing support from external sources,
mhm,
how can we create that community? And we start by holding really sacred space where
mhm,
we can vulnerably show up. And
mhm,
that's really having discussions with whoever that is. It could be one person, it could be the family unit,
mhm,
and being able to say, we're going to have time, space. We can call that quality time. We can call that just talk outs. We can talk, you know, call it something. But
mhm,
having just the agreed upon dynamics, the rules of engagement that this is safe space for everybody to show up unapologetically,
mhm.
to be able to share what's going on, to not be judged. And
Yeah.
that when one person, much like what we do, when one person is speaking, that the other people are also intently listening
Mhm.
and listening from a place of respect,
Yeah.
of love, of acceptance. And part of that is being able to do some of that self-management to say, I do want to hear what this other person has to say. Sometimes that doesn't mean that we're always going to agree on things.
Yeah.
And that's also where you get to have that conversation to say, hey, I'm noticing that you just said XYZ.
Mhm,
And that was kind of triggering for me. And it made me really uncomfortable. Can we talk through that?
mhm.
Why that's uncomfortable for me?
Yeah.
And maybe it's just that two people are just not hearing each other properly, or they're not understanding what the other person had to say.
Mhm,
And that clears the air. And then that creates a whole different layer of vulnerability-based trust because now you've really got to the heart of things
mhm.
and you can bring greater understanding
Yeah.
forward.
And exactly what you just said, you just modeled exactly what to do.
Mhm.
Again, you're modeling because we've talked about how this is you can only control our own behavior, and you modeling and describing what you're doing is so powerful, Danielle. And again, I've seen you do that so many times, and that I know it's impacted me in a positive way in that you being vulnerable again in a very respectful way so that your modeling is really powerful. It's powerful in that you're creating psychological safety.
Yeah.
So Thank you again. So, yeah, May, what are your thoughts? Kind of, we're at the, what are some things that need to happen? So maybe within companies.
So companies definitely, as I said, it trickles down from the top. So the
Hmm.
leadership has to be super aware of how they are leading and how it's impacting or influencing their lower level leaders.
Yeah.
And also to be careful that in different pockets of the company that this is being enforced, right? Because you might have a certain leader that does things a little bit more in the extreme. That group is going to be suffering.
Mm-hmm.
So people need to awareness and then let them have an avenue where they can speak up and voice what's going on.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
That structure kind of thing, an avenue,
yeah,
what you're talking about. Yeah.
without being felt, without them feeling like they're going against the grain and they might lose their job.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So like
Yeah.
in our government, we have these great organizations in place, right? Like the FMLA and the OSHA,
Mm-hmm.
um, in the healthcare world, FDA, to help protect citizens, right, against their rights.
Mm-hmm.
How effectively are they working? I'm sure there are some areas of improvement, right? Especially in the area of mental health, where nobody really wants to take it on and address it full on the way they
Yeah.
should.
Yeah. And all
So,
those things are being threatened again right now with
yeah.
funding cuts. So it's like those exact things that you're talking about, those vehicles and avenues for communication are often being impacted.
Mhm.
And, May, I think for you, you in your role as a recruiter, you play such a huge piece as part of that vehicle and that avenue. You don't necessarily work for the companies that you support, or, it's, you may, you just have an impact on, again, how you are modeling. You're like that first line in so many ways that you're modeling that leadership and effective communication. And your vulnerability, it's another thing that I love how you've showed up here and your ability to be vulnerable in front of an unlimited audience here.
Yeah.
And, so it's again, it's strength. So both of you, I just, kind of shouting out that I see so much strength in the two of you because of your vulnerability and your ability to look at yourself and then communicate about that. That is just so powerful. And to kind of take what both of you shared, I think, when I look at educators, one of the biggest things that I see in schools that causes stress for staff are school schedules. Like not even just school schedules, classroom schedules. Like
Mhm.
especially in buildings, if there is not a common like foundational schedule in the school building that everybody kind of uses as a foundation, it is unbelievably difficult to try and include children with special needs in regular education. It's next to impossible.
Mhm.
So literally, when I see classrooms that are having problem behaviors, one of the big things I say is, let's work on your schedule because a lot of the problem behaviors are coming from lack of structure, lack of routines, lack of clear expectations, and communicating and teaching and reinforcing those. And then, again, I see staff that are stressed because of that, and that falls into the kids. It trickles down, and same thing. It's just throughout the entire building. And so things like that are huge. Focusing on relationships rather than using fear and control. There are negative impacts of using punishment strategies.
Mhm.
It may temporarily make you feel good, like you're in control, but it has, and how May shared earlier that and Danielle, it has longer term impacts, right?
Yeah.
It's fear and control. I talk about it in my book. Shedding Lies, Living Beyond Childhood Trauma. I know May talks about it in her book. And all of our links, by the way, are on our page. But we, we've shared how that's impacted us over the years, and that, you just don't realize how much it can have a long-term effect. And so, just the broader lens, we need to look at, we need to be advocates. We can't just sit in our,
Mhm.
chair and say, oh, well, they should be doing this. Well, okay, let's go call our congressman or, congressperson, and call, go to town halls, or even if they're virtual. I was just on a Medicaid call the other night that is talking about how all of these things, educate yourself. All of these cuts and the government shutdown are impacting Medicaid. That has very much been a part of in many aspects of our family because of mental health and substance abuse service. So, when people say, people could die because of this, that's not hyperbole. It's actually true.
Yeah.
So, people could be dying because of all of these things that are impacting psychological safety, and it's impacting physical safety. So, you know, focus on yourself because that's what you have that control over, and then be the model.
Mhm.
But we do have to make sure we're putting our oxygen mask. So, we've talked about this, but physical safety is at risk. So, because if they can't speak up, the physical safety actually can be
Yeah.
impacted. Again, what I talked about is that I see teachers that are literally injured, and partly because they're not necessarily able to speak up, or, you know, not everybody knows what to do because it's so overwhelming. But silence can literally be dangerous.
Mhm.
And so, even all of these conversations about DEI, despite inclusion efforts, 1 in 4 employees still don't feel safe to speak up. So again, it's not just about people of color or men or, or women. It's about general psychological safety. It doesn't affect one person. So, the quick recap of where we are, kind of these big points that we've been talking about. Psychological safety equals trust, belonging, and freedom to speak. And again, I think just to add that with respect, because oftentimes people can use this as a like, well, I am speaking truth. So, and right now this is all under pressure in America. And all of these federal shifts are trickling down. All these international shifts are trickling down. Putin, another big bully, and you see what's happening. And you know, again, we may get temporary wins, but the long-term impacts are horrible. So, but each of us can build safety in our spaces, and that's the most important thing. So, we want to just really encourage you to reflect on where you feel safe or silenced and notice that. And we want you to identify one context where where you feel maybe not psychologically safe. I want you to think about what is one strategy that we've talked about that you can do, that you can implement. And psychological safety isn't optional. It's the foundation for trust, innovation, and resilience. And I want you to think, just ask yourself, well, where can you create just a little more safety for someone else's voice? All right. Any final notes that you all want to share?
I would say we all can benefit from slowing down.
Mhm.
So, especially in the moments when we are noticing we're defensive, when we're stressed out,
Yeah.
when we are very scared or we don't have that sense of safety,
Yeah.
we don't have to push forward. We don't have to rush towards anything. That is an indication that we can just take a pause and
Yeah.
slow down and reassess. And
Yeah.
again, using everything that we talked about today, how can you take one thing then
Mhm.
and put forth positive action?
Yep. Absolutely. May, what are your thoughts?
I think it is something you need to evaluate and maybe not react
Mhm.
instantly because there are times when we are stressed because we're overloaded and we might say something that was slightly out of context, right? So like Danielle said, maybe sit back, give yourself some rest, relaxation, try to be still with yourself. I learned something the other day, just be very quiet for 1 or 2 minutes and let yourself
Mhm.
calm down and see what really surfaces, see what the truth is.
Yeah,
And
pause, that pausing. Yeah,
pause. It's very important. And then
yeah,
if the truth continues to be the truth, then you need to decide what you want to do to act on
yeah,
it.
absolutely. So we are so grateful to have you with us today. Just a reminder, please subscribe, share, and rise with the community. And so our next episode is actually going to be the last for this series. And it is our favorite lesson so far. We're going to really kind of wrap up. We've had this 13-week episode stint, and we're kind of pulling it together. And this is where we're going to evaluate and look at where do we want to go in the future. So we'd love your input. Share on our Facebook page. We actually are going to be kicking off our website really soon. And so we'll have a place there where we can get your input and love to hear from you. And reach out to us individually if you want. We all have our websites on our Facebook page, on our YouTube page, and please share it with friends. And so join me next time and my two co-hosts, Dr. May Lee and Danielle Dittberner. We are three voices, one mission to heal, lead, and live fully without apology.